حمایت دو حزبی سنای آمریکا از قیام مردم ایران برای جمهوری دموکراتیک مبتنی بر جدایی دین از دولت. کنفرانس با حضور 8 سناتور و شماری از شخصیت‌های آمریکایی و سخنان خانم مریم رجوی.
حضور 40 تن از مشاوران سناتورهای آمریکایی و نمایندگانی از سفارت‌های خارجی در واشنگتن و خبرنگاران رسانه‌های بین‌المللی در این کنفرانس.
خانم مریم رجوی: چند روز دیگر قیام مردم ایران برای سرنگونی فاشیسم دینی 4مین ماه خود را آغاز می کند. همه شواهد نشان می دهد که رژیم در فاز پایانیش به نقطه غیر قابل بازگشت رسیده است. مذاکره و مراوده با این رژیم، آن هم در بحبوحه قیام، فرصت دادن به رژیم برای سرکوب بیشتر است. مردم و مقاومت ایران برای سرنگونی رژیم و کسب آزادی به قیام و فداکاری خودشان اتکا دارند و نیازمند دخالت هیچ دولت خارجی نیستند، اما از همه دولت‌ها انتظار دارند امتیاز دادن و امداد رسانی به دشمنشان را متوقف کنند. قیام کنندگان در این 3 ماه هر گونه دیکتاتوری را محکوم کردند و رژیم کنونی و سابق را در شعارهایشان رد کردند. زمان آن است که سنای ایالات متحده مبارزه مردم ایران برای سرنگونی رژیم و حق مشروع جوانان ایران برای مبارزه با سپاه پاسداران را به رسمیت بشناسد.
سناتور رابرت منندز: مایلم از شورای ملی مقاومت ایران به خاطر تعهدش به بلند کردن صدای ایرانیان در داخل ایران و حمایت مداوم از آزادی مردم ایران قدردانی کنم. ساعت 11 صبح پنجشنبه به وقت آمریکا، کنفرانسی تحت عنوان حمایت سنای آمریکا از قیام مردم ایران برای جمهوری دموکراتیک مبتنی بر جدایی دین از دولت در تالار کندی در سنای آمریکا با سخنرانی گروهی از سناتورها و شخصیت‌های آمریکایی برگزار شد. خانم مریم رجوی، رئیس جمهور برگزیده مقاومت ایران، به صورت آنلاین در این کنفرانس سخنرانی کرد. سناتور رابرت منندز، دموکرات، رئیس کمیته روابط خارجی، سناتور جین شاهین، دموکرات، رئیس زیرکمیته اروپای کمیته روابط خارجی سنا، سناتور کوری بوکر، دموکرات، عضو کمیته روابط خارجی، سناتور روی بلانت، رئیس جمهوریخواهان کمیته قوانین، عضو کمیته اطلاعات، رئیس کمیته سیاستگذاری جمهوریخواهان، سناتور تام تیلیس، جمهوریخواه، عضو کمیته قوای مسلح سنا، رئیس مشترک کمیسیون حقوق بشر سنا، سناتور جان بوزمن، جمهوریخواه، عضو کمیته تخصیص بودجه سنا، سناتور لینزی گراهام، رئیس جمهوریخواهان کمیته بودجه و عضو کمیته‌های قضایی و محیط زیست، سناتور الکس پادیلا، دموکرات، کمیته امنیت داخلی و امور دولتی، کمیته قضایی در این کنفرانس شرکت و سخنرانی کردند.
سناتور جوزف لیبرمن، کاندیدای معاونت ریاست جمهوری دموکرات‌ها در سال 2000، سناتور پیشین کلی آیات، آمباسادور کینزبرگ، سفیر سابق آمریکا در مراکش، از دیگر سخنرانان این کنفرانس بودند. 10 تن از مشاوران سناتورهای آمریکایی و نمایندگانی از سفارت‌های خارجی در واشنگتن و خبرنگاران رسانه‌های بین‌المللی در این کنفرانس شرکت داشتند. گروهی از مسئولان جوامع ایرانی مقیم آمریکا و زندانیان سیاسی سابق در این کنفرانس حضور داشتند. میترا سامانی و شیلان نوایی، زندانیان سیاسی سابق، و دکتر سلماز ابوعلی، استاد دانشگاه جورج میسون و قهرمان کاراته سنتی، دارنده 18 مدال طلای قهرمانی، جزء سخنرانان بودند.
خانم مریم رجوی در سخنرانی خود گفت:
I thank all the senators and distinguished personalities at this conference for expressing their support for the Iranian people's uprising. In a few days, the uprising to overthrow religious fascism will begin its fourth month. These 3 months filled with sacrifice and suffering are the best indications that the regime's overthrow is inevitable. Since Monday, nationwide strikes of merchants have further shaken the regime to its foundation. University and high school students continue their protests demanding an end to the regime. All evidence shows that the regime has reached the point of no return in the final phase of its rule. The Shah's dictatorship had a well-equipped army of 400,000 men, but it could not overcome the will of the Iranian people. The same is true in the present circumstances. The Revolutionary Guards, IRGC, and its arsenal of missiles and drones, terrorism and crimes in Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen could not save Khamenei. Fortunately, today, American public opinion and the US Congress sincerely stand by the Iranian people. Unfortunately, some people in the US State Department are still exchanging messages with the mullahs regime, hoping to get along with them. On November 16, the mullahs foreign minister said they were constantly exchanging messages with the US and made their latest exchange less than 72 hours before. These relations amid the uprising provide more opportunities for the regime to escalate repression. In the previous uprisings, the Iranian people questioned the US on where it stands. Will they stand on their side or beside their murderers? This question is more critical today than ever, considering the revolution developing across the country for the past 3 months. The US has this historic opportunity to stand on the right side of history. Let me recall a fundamental principle that the Iranian people and their resistance rely on their uprising and sacrifices to overthrow the regime. To achieve freedom, they do not want or need the interference of any foreign government in Iranian affairs. But they expect all governments, especially the US, to refrain from giving concessions or assistance to their enemy. The Iranian uprising has so far proved some fundamental realities. It has been proven that biased studies and research produced in Washington indicating that the regime has a popular base were wrong. In these 3 months, protesters denounced all forms of dictatorship and rejected the present and past regimes in their slogans. It was also confirmed that the regime's missile and nuclear programs and its expansionism in the region are to cover up its crisis in the country and its major war, which is the Iranian people's struggle to overthrow the regime. In his speech on November 26, Khamenei was clear. He said they would not abandon their nuclear programs. He stressed that they continue their missile and drone programs and interventions in the Middle East. As it is his usual method, Khamenei will not withdraw from negotiations to be able to insist on demanding lifting of sanctions and, on the other hand, accelerate quietly his nuclear projects. According to IAEA reports and experts' assessments, in the past 20 months, after the new round of negotiations that in practice the sanctions were loosened, the regime made more progress in its nuclear projects. The regime can also take advantage of talks with the US and the West to crack down the Iranian society and create regional wars. Today, Khamenei and those ruling Iran commit more crimes to preserve their rotten rule. From opening fire on defenseless protesters in the streets to blinding children and youth with pellet guns to sexual assaults on detainees and most horrifying of all, the slaughter of children. Some 70 children from 2 to 17 years old have been killed by the repressive forces. Hundreds of children have been arrested and many face death sentences. The time has come for the US to replace its policy of appeasement, negotiation, and inaction with a firm policy. The uprising in Iran will not only establish freedom and democracy, but will also end the increasing threats posed by the regime to regional and global peace. Our people are paying with blood the price of fighting a religious dictatorship. Why aren't the governments and international institutions taking any steps except issuing statements? Why a child-killing regime that brutally represses women and imposes discrimination against them is a member of the UN institutions? Isn't this an insult to humanity? The regime's membership in the Commission on the Status of Women and its membership in UNICEF should be terminated immediately. Fortunately, the process of expulsion from the CSW is underway. The Iranian resistance expects the US Senate to lead an initiative to expel the regime from UNICEF. It is time for the United States and its allies in the P5+1 to, instead of continuing negotiations, which will only serve regimes' criminal policies, impose all the UN Security Council resolutions against the regime and return the sanctions without delay. It is also expected that the US end the widespread illegal activities of the Iranian regime's lobbies on US soil. They are the political and media backers of the ongoing slaughter in Iran. The time has come for the US Senate to recognize the Iranian people's struggle to overthrow the regime and the legitimate right of Iranian youth to fight the IRGC. I thank you all.
Good afternoon. It's great to see you all here today. I'm thrilled to follow my distinguished colleague, for which we shared so much in common, Senator Lieberman, who is a stalwart, strength of moral compass. So I appreciate his words. I appreciate seeing Senator Ayotte here as well. And I understand other of my colleagues have been here before. Let me start off by thanking the Organization of Iranian Communities for putting together today's event on Capitol Hill. I'm thrilled to see so many Iranian Americans from across the country. And I'd like to thank and recognize the National Council of Resistance of Iran for their commitment to elevating your voices, the voices of Iranians inside of Iran, and in constantly advocating for the freedom of the Iranian people. For 90 days, we have seen Iranians gather in squares and march to the streets to confront the misogyny of the regime. At the same time, we've seen the regime respond with the brutality we know all too well. Tear gas, public threats against family members, torture, live gunfire, and death. They have killed hundreds of protesters and arrested tens of thousands more. The actions of this regime won't come as a surprise for anyone who has been paying attention to Iran over the years. I certainly have, since my days in the House of Representatives. Everyone here knows how intractable and dishonest the Iranian regime has been. We have seen it for years with their nuclear ambitions and their approach on negotiations with the JCPOA, which is why I oppose the JCPOA, and I continue to oppose the elements that are being pursued now. We see what this regime is really all about in the Iranian drones that are killing Ukrainians. We see it in the missiles aimed at our Gulf allies. We see it in the attempted assassinations of previous United States officials. They have repressed and tortured many of your friends and family. There are too many pictures here on each side of me. Family members and colleagues who've been opposing the regime for decades. They have massacred innocent political prisoners. And now, on full display across social media, we are seeing how ruthless and desperate they are to keep their grip on power. The difference between what we see now and in the past is simply that more people in the world are understanding the depravity of this regime. And that is what we need to keep alive. We should be using the tools we have to help circumvent the regime's efforts to jam communications of its own people. And we should invoke Magnitsky and other sanctions against those who are perpetrating this heinous act. They must know that they are not beyond the reach of justice. We should not underestimate the deep and real grievances of Iranian protesters. Their chants against the Iranian regime reflect decades of pent-up frustration as to the loss of their basic human rights. Their demands for justice and fundamental rights are inspirational, especially in the face of the Iranian regime's response. All they want is to live a life in peace and prosperity, a visceral and emotional display of the power of simply pursuing peace. So, let us keep standing up to the regime's human rights violations and violence. Let us continue to protect those in Ashraf-free, and I am committed to doing that. Let's keep fighting the senseless repression of women and girls. Let's keep the world's eyes riveted on Tehran's ruthlessness, because if we work together, and we stick to our shared American democratic values and principles, I believe there is nothing we cannot achieve here and for the Iranian people in Iran. Thank you so much.